today and in all of our discussions, we have to go a little bit deeper than the usual discussion. As you know, we've been working on this for 25 years. We've been trying to change the Academy. We've been trying to change the practice of journalism, the staffing of journalism, and we haven't gotten there. And in my book, a couple of things emerged. One is, in American society, there is an institutional infrastructure. There's a systemic infrastructure that is focused on conferring an advantage to a certain sector of society. And so if as journalists we don't question that, know that, work within that, not necessarily work within that, but understand it as we work, then we're going to continue to replicate it. The second thing is, in talking with the social psychologists, the experimental psychologists, about why these things happen, why they're able to continue, we each carry with us an unconscious fear of the other, an unconscious sort of set of glasses that emerges from our own experience, and Dory will tell you a bit more about that, that limits our vision, that limits our understanding of what truth is, about what the story is, about even what we should be teaching. So those are the kinds of questions that I hope we'll examine today. We're talking about the big institutional infrastructure, but what happens within each individual university? What sort of changes can happen either at the classroom level or at the institutional level within the university? So when we talk about these blinders someone mentioned, that it's only certain people's issues in academia, how to change that? How to change the discussion within, not the newsroom in this case, but within the academic environment, within the faculty meeting. So it's not just one person or another always bringing this up, but becomes institutionalized in the discussion. Dory Maynard, I hope you're quite familiar with the fault lines framework. If you're not, maybe Dory can give a quick overview. It's a wonderful, wonderful framework to think about teaching diversity and reporting, and in just thinking about the news, as well as evaluating diversity and the way the whole, how the whole of America is or isn't covered. So I wanted to ask Dory, well, how do we use these fault lines? How can we use the fault lines to ease the discussion? That a lot of educators, even if they are teaching diversity, have a blind spot when it comes to LGBT issues. So, and teaching that. So I wondered why you think it's really important that these are included as part of the diversity equation, and why now particularly. So in terms of blind spots, there's also a very large institutional blind spot that has to do with ethnic media. And I wanted to ask Sandy, when you think about ethnic media, when you think about their practices and approaches, are there aspects that should or could be taught in the basic journalism curriculum, in the courses? What could students learn from the practices and approaches, such as how to determine what a news story is, how to determine what an excellent source is, that might help us open that view of the world a bit more?
Certain groups or standards or perceptions are advantaged over others. And I think what's happening is, when this came up, it was seen as a majority-minority society, and certain groups were seen as minorities. And that's still what we have today. People who are under the umbrella of diversity are seen as minor, less than, not as important as, and with concerns that are peripheral or marginalized to what's seen as the mainstream. Faculty who are drawn to journalism schools tend to come from those mass audience media. They'll look at people from the, major newspapers, TV stations, networks, will not look at the ethnic media, the targeted media, and such, which are very much the experience of students in society today. If you see where media are going and where they're growing, it's toward the segmented, targeted, what we call class media, as opposed to mass media. And therefore, when you start talking about diversity and where groups that need to be covered that have been undercovered, faculty members that can help with that coverage, help train their students, journalism comes up short. They're not taking people who have those experiences. They're taking people who have had a mass audience, mass media approach to things. And so we end up being on the short end. In terms of accreditation specifically, the rules have been on the books for a long time. First is Standard 12, now it's part of Standard 3. But I was served on the accrediting committee in the 1980s, and during the 1990s I went to just about every meeting, not as a member, but I was with the Freedom Forum, and so that was a good place for us to meet journalism educators. And once, again and again and again, you would see that schools would come up, they would be assessed, there's diverse accreditation teams, the standards there, but if they fell short on what was then standard 12, they would basically get a free pass. That's okay, we can still reaccredit them. There are actually some schools who were put on warning for standard 12 in one accreditation cycle. They come up the next cycle and they're worse off than they were when they were put on warning, and they would still be reaccredited. Yet if they came, so until they put some teeth into the enforcement of the accreditation standard that relates to diversity, which fortunately now on the curriculum side has been broadened to include sexual orientation issues, you're just basically going to see people get a free pass. We've had representation from the diversity groups, journalists associations of black journalists, and LGJA and others, NAHJ, AEJA, on the accreditation council. And my perception in terms of seeing it is that they vote the right way, but they need to be able to voice the right way. They have to be seen as NLGJ's representative here is the equivalent of ASNE's representative here. And somehow that is still not recognized. So they still see themselves, they need to be recognized both for their professional credentials they bring to the table and also to the organization that they put forth. And second, on the last line, in terms of scholarship, it all gets down to content. If somebody says, yes, we want to do a better job, if you went beyond that 35%, and but what textbooks will we use? What course materials are available? What videos? What websites? Somehow people don't realize the wealth of materials that is now on the table and that is now available. It used to be, well, we'll hire a Latino and they'll take care of the Latino stuff for us, or a black and they'll take care of this. Well, that's true. Or we have somebody who knows something about gay and lesbian issues, so they can, they'll handle that. What we have to get the message across is this is everybody's issue. It's your voice is more important than your vote. If your voice is not listened to and not respected, then it doesn't matter really as much if you only have one vote. Well, I too am not willing to pass the torch to a new generation. I think if you're smart enough to get a PhD, which basically is a research degree, you should be smart enough to be able to find the book you wrote, to find the book you wrote, to find your website, to go to the NLGJA website and the other resources available. I think anybody who's smart enough to get in there should do what's required to get tenure. The thing is that it has to be enforced at the tenure level. And it's not just teaching a course, but it's integrating materials throughout your courses. I'm not an expert on Asian Americans in the media, but I have found wonderful stories in the story of Wong Chin Fu, for instance, in the 1870s, and what he was doing. These make our classes better when you're able to address these issues. And anybody who wants to prepare people for the next generation is going to have to be able to deal with them. And you can't wait until, a whole new generation of PhD people are employed. I think it should be in PhD training, but I wouldn't defer it until that time.